Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to take your seats, we'll get started in a second. Whilst you're doing so, my name is Trevor Watkins. I've had the pleasure of working with SoccerX for many, many years. I also used to own AFC Bournemouth on behalf of the fans. So this is a great panel. I'm delighted to be able to chair it. It reflects a lot of what we do day to day across my business at Pinsent Masons and the globalization of sport. And I think that is hugely reflected in the fact that we are sitting here in Florida, and yet we have Germany, Italy, Spain, Canada stroke England, as you'll see. And one fact about Simon that may not come out, Adam, sorry if I say Simon, Adam, is you were a professional athlete many years ago.
Not just me as well. I think you've missed this gentleman. Silver medal in the Olympics.
No, we didn't pick up on this in the pre-planning.
I did my research.
That was a long time ago and a lot of pounds ago, so I can tell that.
The lightweight category at the time, was it?
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, gentlemen, we are here sitting in Florida. We're talking soccer. Marc, from a German perspective, from a club perspective, why are you here?
Start with the why, I love it. So my name is Marc Lingenhoff. I oversee Borussia Dortmund's activities in the Americas region. We just opened an office in February in Midtown Manhattan. Doesn't mean that we haven't done anything before in the region. It's really just the next step in our activities in the US and South America. Why are we here? Because we've been here for 6-7 years already. Ever since Christian Pulisic joined us, there was a bit of a pull effect. We got more interest into our club, our brand, and we started our activities. And we started to build a youth academy system. We started to get fan clubs registered. We started to have commercial partners. So all this built over the last 6-7 years, and we just follow the fan. It's a fan calling, really, and that's why we're here.
And to help the audience, give us an impression of the club, its status in Germany, fan base, a little bit more detail. What's your foundation that you're building on?
So we are from the Ruhrgebiet in Germany, which is in the northwest of Germany. We're based in Dortmund. It's a working class town, small town. We're not Munich. We're not the shiny Düsseldorf or Hamburgs of the world. We appreciate hard work, former steel industry. So our fan base appreciates the hard work. We are consistently on the international stage in Champions League 9 years in a row. I think we take some pride in that. Almost won it last season. But we are a strong number 2 in Germany after the other team in the south.
The team that should not be named.
Yes, no, it's, you know what we're talking about, those with the red color. So yeah, a strong number 2, and we hope to change that over time.
And a huge reputation for producing talent.
Absolutely, thank you for that prompt. Yes, we are famous for selling our best players. It's part of our business model. But we nurture talent. We have a very strong academy system. You know, the Bellinghams, the Haalands, the Sanchos, they all went through the system. Marco Reus, who's now in LA. So yeah, it's a tough business model to uphold, but we keep trying and keep doing. And you know, sometimes it's not the individual that's the star; it's the team. And I think that's what we're seeing right now in Dortmund. That there's not one player that really stands out, or not yet, at least. So right now, the team is the star.
And Andy, for you, different considerations being here, representing a league. What is it that's driving you to be here?
So, I mean, it's just a really great time for football in Italy, for soccer. Over the last few years, we like to say calcio. So calcio is soccer in Italian. Calcio was back. So in the 80s and 90s, Serie A was the #1 league in the world. And there was a little bit of a dip. But over the last few years, there's been a real resurgence in soccer or in Serie A around the world. Last year, we got a 5th Champions League spot. So the opportunity here in the US is just how do we get more people engaged with Serie A and our clubs and our players. And so we opened the office here. I'd like to think about our work across 5 key dimensions. So one is brand development. How do we get more people to understand that Serie A is the league that it is and is competing at the level that it's competing? Two is audience development. How do we get more people connected to our social channels, subscribe to our email, watch our matches on CBS, who's a great broadcast partner. Three, we're here to build a commercial business. So we are talking to sponsors and looking to work with people to help bring Calcio to more people in the US. We do a lot of work in the corporate and social responsibility area. We have partnerships with South Bronx United, Street Soccer USA, and lastly, and maybe most importantly, is our job is to support the clubs here. So our clubs don't have offices today. So as clubs want to activate here, AC Milan was here for the summer tour. We'll have Juventus and Inter here for the Club World Cup. So and then day in and day out, we're supporting the clubs on activations and content development. So those are our 5 key dimensions and why this office exists.
And for you, Nicolás, from a Spanish perspective, it was fascinating to learn that Barcelona was here in the 1930s. Real Madrid had been playing here in the 1920s. And you kept coming back. What is it you've been doing and trying to achieve over the last few years?
So I will say, like in our case, is different in the sense that we have probably the 2 biggest clubs brands in the world. So it's amazing to have them in the league and have them growing their brands, have been doing this activity. But we need, as a league, to be also supporting all the other clubs at the same level than Barcelona and Real Madrid. And that's why in 2018 we decided to take an approach to expand into the US market. Soccer is a global sport. It's not anymore a domestic thing. We have millions of fans in the US. We need to be closer to them. We need to cater to them. And people need to start understanding that for us, a fan that is buying a season ticket holder in Spain has the same value that somebody that wakes up at 6 a.m., pays $20 every month to watch La Liga on ESPN Plus, and wakes up to follow their team every week. So fans are now global, and we need to be closer to them, understand their needs, and activate for them, and make them feel part of this experience.
And again, just by way of background for the audience, how long has La Liga, how long have you been here? What presence do you have?
So the approach that we took to the market is very different to what we have in any other country in the world due to the complexity, how diverse, how big this market is. We signed a joint venture with Relevant Sports for 20 years in 2018. It's a very sophisticated operation, and this is not a marketing unit of a league in the US. So this is a business. It needs to be profitable. We've been profitable since year 3. We've signed the 2 biggest media deals of La Liga outside of Spain, both with ESPN in the US and Sky in Mexico. Through the duration of this contract, we are delivering $2 billion back to La Liga and to the clubs. And since year 3 being profitable, we've generated in 6 years 77 million in revenues. 36 of these have been reinvested in the market, which is important about what you are doing in the market, keep growing the sport in the market. And 41 million of this amount have gone back to the clubs. So we are now working with the clubs to sustain and support them coming to the US also and growing their audience here.
So a true revenue-generating, profit-making entity that is giving back to...
It has to be, because if not, at some point somebody's going to ask, why are we spending this money there?
And that's a very, very good question. So Adam, from your perspective, marketing experience from England, based in Canada, doing a lot of work in North America, what is the landscape that these organizations are up against or trying to get involved in, given you've got NBA Africa, NBA playing in the Middle East, Europe, NFL doing the same?
Yeah, I think it's, again, where there's opportunities, obviously challenges for them, but ultimately football is arguably probably the only global sport that really exists out there where everywhere is playing it. We obviously had the World Series of Baseball a couple of weeks ago, which 2 American teams are playing against each other. So I think the opportunity and the idea of fandom, there's a huge opportunity, a huge market here in North America. And I think the interesting thing and opportunity is that there's people out there want to be fans of a certain team, and they may not have found who that team is yet, or they may never land on a team. But whenever we see watch parties or matches here, it's a sea of colors of jerseys. People have got a Real Madrid jersey watching a Liverpool match. They've got a Juventus jersey watching a Barcelona match. And I think that's where ultimately kind of the leagues and the team, they've got a big opportunity here to, again, frenemies is probably what we want to call it, but there's a huge opportunity to come together and help grow the game. Obviously, the next couple of years in North America is big for football. You've obviously got the Club World Cup, and you've got the World Cup after that as well. So I think this is the moment now where they can really start to grow, not just the game, but obviously try and attract more and more people to the various different teams that exist in Serie A, La Liga, the Premiership, or individual teams like Borussia.
Is that what you would set as a main objective, the building up of the fan base here, or is there more to it for you?
I think there's more to it because obviously there's significant competition for like eyeballs here. You've got your traditional, your NFLs, the NBA, the MLB, where you've got these die-hard fans who might just be locked in on that, or college sport as well, which is ultimately as big. But there's a huge opportunity. You've obviously got the MLS here, which is the homegrown product, and you see talent like the Messi's coming, which has brought significant eyeballs and money to the league. But that's also opportunity here for these European leagues as well. And I think they're starting to see that, the investments coming in from the leagues, the teams, and then the brands are also starting to follow now as well, which ultimately comes back down to what Nicolás said around sustainability. They need to have money coming in. They can't just continue to keep spending because ultimately someone's going to say, this is not a great business model, let's change it.
And last question, just at this moment for you, your business looks at data, it looks at the reach, it looks at really what a product like the various leagues and teams here are doing to deliver value. Are you seeing rights values going up because of it? Are you seeing new partners wanting to get involved with the clubs and the leagues?
Yeah, I think ultimately, again, I'm the CEO of SPIQE, but amongst the portfolio and sister companies that I have, we've been doing digital overlay for a number of years for some big clubs. So working with Real Madrid, working with AC Inter Milan, allowing them to monetize the US audience already. So I think there's now just a continuation and opportunity of that to expand beyond that. And again, as teams continue to come over here to North America for games, that's where you can get bums on seats, you can build that fandom and that long-term connection between individuals and the teams. And again, as this progresses, who knows, like are the Champions League going to come here and host a game here and things like that? There's rumors that that's going to be something that happens. So I think the world of sport and obviously football as a whole, the eyes are on North America now for the next couple of years, and then you obviously got the Olympics afterwards with football involved there as well. So I think there's just a huge opportunity now that really needs to be taken by both hands. And I think by people coming together like this and, again, the collaboration that exists, I think ultimately that's a better product for everybody.
And Marc, picking up on something you mentioned earlier, it's clearly not just about fans for you. You've got an academy you've had in Texas for many years. Are you trying to get talent from here then to boost the club in the long term? But tell us a bit more about that program.
Yeah, so I think there are things that we can control and things that we cannot control. I cannot control who we sign, how we scout, how we do all that. That's not my responsibility. So my task is to build a infrastructure that we can build fandom, but we can also immerse ourselves into the US sports landscape and soccer landscape. And youth sports is a big part of that. So we are famous for developing players, and I think all of us have a responsibility to help grow the game in this country. And the Youth Academy is just something that came natural to us. We have now around 18 academies, around 5,000 boys and girls spread out across the country. And that's a growth model for us. It's working. We're very authentic about it. We have German coaches from Dortmund fly in every quarter to make sure that the local coaches are upskilled, etc. So that's one of the centerpiece of our activities, including, on top we have the fan clubs, we have commercial partners, we have a very strong social media presence with Black Yellow, which is a very strong platform for us to connect with the fan. And you talked about dimensions, and we have I call the playing field on things and what we explore to connect with the local fans.
Is the academy a pathway to eventually playing for the first team?
We're not at that stage yet that we can call it a pathway, because this market is so fragmented, as everybody knows in this room, and there are so many entry points into the sport. We give one of those access points, but we haven't been able to connect it yet to one of the many options for talent to develop further.
That was certainly probably not for this panel, but the multi-club ownership, the way in which clubs relate to each other is fascinating. But Andy, coming back to you and the way in which you're building your presence. You came up with the Made in Italy campaign, and you were mentioning earlier, you got some exciting new developments as well in how you're building those relationships.
Yeah, so I mean, our big opportunity here to differentiate ourselves is Italian culture, right? So Americans, we did some research, 51 million Americans have an affinity for Italian culture. 3 million Americans travel to Italy every year. So that's a really big opportunity. Fashion is a big part of Italian culture. So this morning we actually announced a partnership with Classic Football Shirts. If people are aware of the jersey company that's done really well here, it's growing quickly. So we're going to activate with them on the ground. A lot of it I mentioned is celebrating the heritage of the 80s and 90s through vintage shirts, but also celebrating the games today. So next Saturday, everyone's invited who is in New York. We're doing a watch party that actually features Juventus and AC Milan. And so actually those teams both have 2 American players, including Christian Pulisic, Timothy Weah, Weston McKennie, and Yunus Musa. And so it's a real celebration of not only Italian culture and through fashion and football, but also the Americans playing. And after that match is Atalanta plays Parma. So it'll be a really great opportunity for us to really celebrate the past and the present of Italian football in the US.
And from that perspective, you get a lot of support from the individual clubs on their mandate, and is it a great relationship in terms of how you build that out with the games they're going to play here and so on?
Absolutely. So we have great relationships with the clubs, and they look to us to strategize on how they activate in the market. They're all very supportive. In fact, I just got a message today. I got a signed more incentive to come to the watch party. Signed Pulisic and Musa jerseys from AC Milan to raffle off at our event next week. They're very supportive of the work we need to do here because we are representing all 20 clubs here on the ground.
And Nicolás, you mentioned earlier Relevant. Obviously, Relevant they've had a huge experience in organizing pre-season tours and their involvement in other professional sports in the US. 20 years, long time. What are your key ingredients for making that relationship a success?
Yeah, so I think first it shows that we are not here just taking the hype of the World Cup, which I think is important. This is not we come, we take what we can, we leave. The idea is to stay here and to build something that is sustainable in the long term. And then I think the approach we've taken in the market is no matter who you are from a soccer perspective, fan, and how you relate to soccer or to La Liga, we want to have something for you. This, explained very quick, and I'm going to try not to extend too much, means let's say you're a hardcore Real Madrid fan and you want to watch all their games. Well, ESPN Plus, we think we have one of the best distribution strategies in the US, all 380 games there. You don't need to have 3 subscriptions, you don't need to have streaming and cable. You go there, you have everything you want. On top of that, we have a studio of content. Adrian here is our head of content and distribution with 20 people in Guadalajara, Mexico, just creating content for this region. Not somebody in Madrid thinking that they know how they can connect with the fans here. No, people that know the market and the Hispanics especially. Second, let's say you are a casual sport fan that you don't necessarily watch every game, but you have a favorite team and you enjoy having fun with your friends. We have a program called El Partidazo, where we basically organize 40 watch parties across the US in 10 different cities to be there with our fans celebrating their passion. Let's say you're a kid, you play FC25, you watch highlights, but you don't necessarily watch La Liga games because you don't watch 90 minutes of a game, where we have a tournament in gaming where playing gaming against celebrities, you can win a trip to Spain and watch a live game. So we tailor to all our different kind of fans. And last but not least, you are a kid, you don't know anything about Serie, La Liga, you just care about the ball. We have grassroots initiatives to try to be next to you while you develop your soccer career. So it's understanding what the different personas, or who the different personas could be, and what can we offer them, and be there for them for the long term.
And so, Adam, listening to that, we've got the academies, we've got the Made in Italy, we've got the Relevant. What are the key ingredients for you with the research you're doing? What are you seeing that these organizations should be doing more of? And use of technology, for example.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think it's, again, ultimately kind of two things. Number one, growing the game, that's a separate piece of the pie, but obviously the commercialization aspect is probably where I spend the most of my time. And again, I think when you talk about those grassroots programs where they're just trying to get more and more people at the base level playing this game, ultimately the sons or the daughters then start to influence the families and the mothers and fathers that instead of going to watch a basketball game or wherever it may be in the afternoon, they're pushing them to say, okay, let's sit down at 11 a.m., it's brunch, we're going to watch LALIGA or Serie or something like that, and then in the afternoon go engage with that local team at the MLS level. I think that's one of the beauties of having a European product here in North America. I mean, I do it all the time. I'm a Liverpool fan. I watch it in the morning, and I've got the afternoon to watch some other sport or another football match. So, I mean, that's where there's just a huge opportunity, and ultimately, the more eyeballs that we can continue to show coming into the sport, into the game, that's where ultimately the advertisers and the brands will come in, and that whole cycle continues to work then from a commercialization perspective, because again, we can only pour certain amounts of money into growing this, but if it's not sustainable and the growth doesn't continue, we kind of see it filter off then. Obviously, you had like the World Cup was here in '94, I believe it was. And again, we kind of saw a bit of a drop off, then MLS came along and they tried to rebuild it. So I think taking those learnings and providing the platform now for growth beyond the World Cup is the biggest thing here right now.
It'd be interesting to get your take, gentlemen, on that point. So, as you said, 1994 happened, issue with legacy, which often surrounds major events. You're here, and as I understand it, you're looking for a sustainable long term. How important is 2026 to you, and how do you think you can utilize that to help your growth in the future, to all of you?
I mean, for me, I actually don't, I think 2026, first of all, we're coming from a higher base than we were in 1994, so that's, you know, a major advantage. But to me, I think less about 2026 because that's going to be an organic growth that I'd like to think we have control over, but that's just going to happen organically and it's going to be incredible. To me, what I worry about and what I think about most is what is the strategy for retention? So we don't have the same problem we had in 1994 where we had this huge spike and then went kind of basically back down to where we were before, we being the sport in general. So what I think we as a sport need to think about is what do you do the day after the World Cup? Well, first of all, building up to the World Cup to build your relevance, but then how do you stay relevant and what are the strategies you deploy so that fans who are interested have somewhere to go and somewhere to connect after the World Cup, after their interest has been piqued by the event?
I mean, for me, 25 is probably bigger than 26 because we can tell our story through, authentically through the club. We're participating in the Club World Cup. World Cup, amazing for the overall interest into the sport, the eyeballs, and probably more youth playing soccer. But for us, it's hard then to tell a story. It's through the players, it's through their teams, so it's a bit of a stretch to be authentically telling our story. So next year is the big year for us to show up here over 2 to 3 weeks, really. It's unprecedented to have that type of exposure in the market, so we will make sure to capitalize on that in many ways.
So in terms of planning, is there anything you can share that?
No.
With your secret ingredient.
No, what I can say is that the club has done a tremendous job over the last 6-7 years to build that infrastructure. And now we're just, we have an investment and growth strategy to just accelerate those initiatives and put more resources behind it. But the clear intention is in 7 months from now, we are ready and tap into that infrastructure, be it fan clubs, academies, and activate all of that. Regardless of where we're going to play, East Coast, West Coast, we are ready, we are prepared to have strong partners in place to do everything the BVB way.
Nicolás.
In our case, it's basically what these gentlemen have said, like it's World Cup, Clubs World Cup, the World Cup, Women World Cup, LA Olympics, like it's going to be very busy the next 4 years. So we need to make sure that we have the proper foundations to take advantage of that opportunity but keep growing after. I feel the work that our commercial team is doing with our partners is amazing, and we want to keep building this relationship with these brands beyond the World Cup so they understand that their soccer strategy can be tied to La Liga and they can see the benefit there beyond just a single event or a hype moment, to say it in a way. That's why a lot of what we do requires a lot of investment. You are thinking about 30 people between Mexico and New York. You are thinking about all these programs that I mentioned. Having the support and the help of these commercial partners that understand that this is not just I put my logo, I forget, is no, I'm trying to, tailor for the US Hispanics in the US, how La Liga can help me do that in a organic and realistic way, not just like I put my logo and I'm fine,
And you mentioned Mexico. You've got your office in Guadalajara as well as your base here in the US. How important is that connection between the two countries for what you're trying to achieve here?
It's massive. You need to understand that last poll that I saw was 60-something millions of US Hispanics in the US. Like, that's not something to treat like lightly. 60% of them are Mexicans. So a lot of the things that we do are not like, this is for Mexico, this is for the US. No, this is in Spanish, and we do it in English, in the US and in Mexico, and this is in English, and we tailor to the general market. So our strategy is more focused on the different personas, as I was mentioning before, than not necessarily countries. Like, understanding North America as just US or just Canada, of course there's a difference, but the US is very diverse. So you can have strategies that you can apply here and open in Colombia. Because if you are targeting Colombians in the US, why would you not take advantage of that for your Colombian fans in Colombia too?
And this is something you're finding out in terms of your research and marketing and direction of travel for clients, this honing of campaigns and focusing on at a micro level as well as a global level.
Yeah, I think so. And again, I think the Mexican one's a really good example. I think Mexican League's the most watched league in North America right now. So again, it's kind of an interesting, huge opportunity for soccer fans here. But ultimately, a lot of the brands, especially brands that might be non-endemic to football, like North American ones, there's an education process, I think, about who is the audiences and who are the fans and like what do they really want to be connected with. Because again, you get a lot of the brands who are just fully focused on American football, and it's so foreign and alien for them to be attached to soccer. But that's where, as the education process, and I think they start to get the head around what global football really is and the opportunity there, that's a massive opportunity for everybody from a commercialization perspective. And again, it comes down to what Nicolás said. It can't be, here's a logo, slap it somewhere and walk away. It's got to be authentic. It's got to be woven into the story and the background, the makeup of these leagues and these teams to make it really resonate ultimately with the personas they're trying to connect with.
And a long-term commitment.
I would say, yeah, I mean, it's not authentic if it's kind of, here's 1 year, we're gone the next year, then there's no sustainability there, I don't think, or authenticity for the brand long term. Obviously, people are going to probably try it with the Club World Cup and the World Cup. But I think for the long term, and again, these gentlemen are doing a really good job of it, is identifying those partners that are in it for the long term, which ultimately is going to benefit not only themselves, but also the bigger good of the game as well. And
you mentioned you're a Liverpool fan.
Yes.
I mean, I'm a Bournemouth fan. Probably the same that our family or my father took me when I was 7, and I turned into a lifelong Bournemouth fan. These gentlemen are trying to crack a new market, relatively new. What are you seeing in terms of fandom and the way in which the US, the Mexican fan, the Canadian fan would look at the offering? Is it a different way of what we might see traditionally?
Yeah, I think it is different. I mean, again, you look at the US sport landscape, you have like the NCAA college system. People are loyal and die hard to the universities that they end up going to. If you go to Michigan, you support Michigan the rest of your life.
So it's a bit like you and me with Liverpool and Bournemouth, that wherever that's your...
Yeah, it kind of becomes that. Whereas again, like these are new teams, new leagues that are coming here, and people I think are trying to figure out where they ultimately align from an affinity perspective. Again, you probably got a lot of Christian Pulisic fans who they might have been buying Dortmund jerseys or whatever it is, and then they swap as he moves around different clubs and stuff. So I think that's where, again, it's building that connection. I think it ultimately has to come beyond just the individual players, because they're going to come and go ultimately. But I think when you look at the history and the background, I mean, like you were saying before, Barcelona, Real Madrid have been coming in since 1920. That as clubs, they're not going to go anywhere. If, for all we know, I mean, we see it in US sport all the time, Oakland Athletics baseball team are off to Vegas, and overnight a hockey team went from Arizona to Utah. That's not going to happen with these brands of these football clubs. So that's where I think that long-term connection and that relationship between within families as well, like you said, like my dad taught me, my granddad, et cetera, it can become that family connection. I think football gives that opportunity, unlike some of the sports that exist currently in North America.
I agree with that, and I think the only thing that I will add to that is that's different when you tap into US Hispanics. A lot of time there's heritage there. My grandpa followed Real Madrid, Hugo Sanchez played there, I'm in love with Real Madrid, it's a family thing. So you cannot see the soccer fan as just one group. It's like, depending on kind of like the demographics, the origins, their heritage, they are different. And that's why I think the biggest opportunity we had when we started our operation was US Hispanics, is you don't need to teach them what soccer is. They are not here, they are here. They are very close in the journey to become a fan if they are not already a fan. And now we are trying to expand beyond the US Hispanics to that general market soccer fan with all the other initiatives that we are putting together. But just to chime into there, like these people know soccer, and for them soccer is passion.
Is the same for you, Andy, in terms of obviously the Italian heritage, Italian culture that's already embedded within the US in particular, that you're actually segmenting and looking at that heritage, but also a new generation of fans?
I mean, absolutely. So, you know, as we know, there are kids who love soccer, but don't even, I mean, you actually mentioned this, who don't watch games, right? So they have a different relationship, and I think it's important for us to meet the fan, and especially the younger fans where they are, because eventually they will graduate to watching matches, or I think it's fair to assume that they will graduate to watching matches when they have a longer attention span. But I think it's ultimately important to engage them with content and games and things that they find fun and engaging at the earlier ages, so then as they age up, this is the natural league for them to become acquainted with and oriented to.
And Marc, from your perspective, is it like one Borussia Dortmund across US, Germany, globally, or do you find that there are differing requirements, different ways of having a relationship with fans here in other countries?
Yeah, I think, I mean, Adam said it well, like there's only one team as a European football fan, right? Here, I think, you know, you see fans and you hear a lot, oh, my favorite team in Spain is Madrid, in Italy it's Milan, in Germany it's Dortmund. So that's something that we are, that's a challenge, but we also lean into that and just say, we want to be your choice for German soccer. I found it very interesting because there's this stereotype of, oh, your fans are only expats that live in Pittsburgh. And that's not true. Like if you go to our fan clubs, you go to these watch parties, 80% are non-expats, right? So there's the audience is there, and there is already a level of loyalty that we see within those fan groups because they're committed, they're signed up, they want to connect. But then there's a big group out there that either like Dortmund because that's their favorite team in the FIFA game, right? And because we always have fast wingers, so they choose always Dortmund as a team. Then we had some great players, and that's great. I like Haaland. What's this black-yellow thing there, that team called Dortmund? All right, I want to explore. And that's our job here, to say, let's give them the access and the experience, the best possible experience to experience Dortmund, and be it through our black-yellow channels or be it through retail, make it easy that they have a great shopping experience. That's our job, and that's what we are trying to control. And then if there's an American player, I'll take it. If they win the Champions League, I'll take it. But that's something you cannot control.
That's
right?
An interesting one, because we were talking about players earlier, and players move, players come and go. Adam, from your perspective, what's more important for the success of their projects? Is it having household name players, or is it having teams that succeed? As Andy mentioned, 5 Champions League spots. What's the secret ingredient?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily one thing. I mean, I know we were talking before. I mean, we did some research. We kind of saw like the Brady effect, which when he leaves the New England Patriots, he took a ton of fans with him down to Tampa Bay. So again, that effect where people are loyal to a certain player is always going to happen. But ultimately, these players are going to come and go. They're going to retire. They're going to move on. But the legacy and kind of the culture and the heritage of those teams still exist. And then there's a next wave of players that come through that people get attached to. And that's where the storytelling aspect, I think, of these clubs and what's going on becomes ultimately important, because that's then how they can sustain that long-term legacy. and again, keep them fans engaged beyond a certain player playing for the team or wherever it may be. So definitely the talent is potentially a hook to get people in, to get that initial eyeball, but the attention and to keep them there, that ultimately then comes down to how good a storytelling they can do, what the product ultimately looks like, and that's again where they can have some control over that.
And on a slightly more controversial aspect, we'll start with you first of all.
No
problem. The guys. Obviously, soccer is booming here in this country. USL, MLS, we've talked about the World Cup. At what cost to the domestic market, the advances of European leagues and European teams here?
I mean, not necessarily at a cost of it. I mean, obviously, you have Messi leaving La Liga, going to the MLS. I think ultimately, a strong product here in North America ultimately then props up what these gentlemen are trying to do, and then vice versa as well. I think a strong product there ultimately can kind of help here. So I think it's, I think we're seeing on this panel right now, I'm sure these guys talk away from this panel as well and like share ideas, share opinions on how they can ultimately grow the big pie, the ultimate pie that is football here in America. And then everyone gets their little piece of that at that stage. So I think, again, everyone needs to be able to put out a better product, a more sustainable product, and ultimately one that's kind of consistent. And that's then when the money will continue to come in from the advertisers and the brands who want to be part of that and helps tell these stories in collaboration with them. So, I think ultimately it's a combination of the two. They both have to prop each other up.
And I'd be interested to hear from the three of you, how important is the domestic league here to your success? And how do you see your relationship with the teams here or with the league here?
I mean, Marc said something earlier that I think is worth coming back to a long time ago, but it was about our matches being on in the mornings, and I think they're not competitive, right? And I think some people think our matches being on in the mornings is a liability. I think it's actually a great opportunity for us because there's less competition and it's differentiated, and then so it's really not competitive, especially now that Apple has moved the MLS games to Saturday evenings, which personally isn't great for me as a New York City fan, having to spend all my Saturday nights occupied. But we're not competitive with the MLS. So I think a rising tide lifts all boats, and I think just a fan journey. It's easy to be a fan of MLS teams, USL teams, NWSL teams, and it doesn't come at the cost of European fandom.
And just want to
go ahead, Marc.
Marc, sorry.
All right. I look at MLS as a barometer of health for the sport. If they are growing, if they're attracting talent, if they can sell tickets, if they can sell the sponsorships, if they have the broadcasting rights, if they bring in the players, that's for me. If they're healthy as a league, I think the sport overall is in a good shape. And the second one I'm looking at is obviously the youth sport. Like, are those teams growing? Is there interest in the sport? Is the youth growing? So those are the two things when you talk about domestic league and domestic impact to what we do. Those are the two things I'm looking at.
I think, and it's fascinating hearing from the likes of David Blitzer and Marc Lasry, other significant investors, that youth sport is where they really see they're putting their money in years to come. Sorry, Nicolás, you can add.
Yeah, no, I agree with them. There's nothing I can add on that. And I think if it ends up not working, it's not going to be because of us. I think it's because we need to understand better how to interest and get the interest of the fans with this competitive landscape that we have. It goes even beyond soccer. We try to learn from NFL, from NBA. Marc was mentioning they do collaborations with clubs. We also, when we bring our clubs over, we do kind of like a master's degree in a week, go there and learn how they activate, how they talk to their fans, how the offering in terms of entertainment in this country, you don't see it anywhere else. It's a different culture over Europe, but there's a lot to learn to the American way, especially when it comes to revenue, especially. So I think, again, not being competitive and being an opportunity to also learn how to tackle the US fans, it's always positive, and it gotta be positive for everybody.
And one thing we haven't touched on, we've talked about youth football, talked about your leagues and the team. What about women's football and participation of women? How important is that as part of your growth plans and open to all of you? And Adam, how important should it be? Do you want to start with Adam, maybe?
Yeah, we actually did an article on this. I think last week we released it on our website around women's sport and kind of the growth and the commercialization of that. And I think just in general, you have NIL with the colleges where now they're actually paying the athletes. So you're seeing more and more of that from an early age where people are building the brand, building the profile. And then that's obviously now transitioning into the women's sport as well. I mean, in Canada, they're launching the first league, I think it's next year. So the sport is booming and growing. And I think the women's sport is, again, bringing more and more people to the game. And ultimately, that's good for everybody. Because, again, I think we've got to talk, especially here in America still, because there's so much competition from the NFL, the NBA, the incumbents, that, again, we need the whole pie and the game as a whole to do well, and whether that's grassroots participation at the youth level, whether that's, again, men and women, boys and girls playing the sport, and ultimately now putting on a better product for the women as well from a professional perspective. That's obviously ultimately great for everybody, and it brings in additional money, additional brands that may have not wanted to come in on the men's side, but now they are. So ultimately, I think it's again, great for the game and more money, more eyeballs coming in.
For us, it was strategic, like literally being a men's league and understanding that the women league depended on the federation, and now they are independent finally. And they have their own kind of like entity that regulates the sport in Spain. We created a vertical that was like women's soccer, just to be able to incentivize our clubs to create women division. Like 5-6 years ago, not all LALIGA clubs have a women division. So for us, it was super important to have that happen. And now you are starting to see things like Aitana Bonmatí, the results that we have in the Ballon d'Or. In the end, that's the Spanish brand. That's like Spanish soccer is being stronger than ever with the Euros, with everything. That benefits us too. And then having this kind of talent being exported to and going to other countries and started playing in the NWSL, in the Liga MX and whatever, help us a lot too to showcase that talent. So it's kind of like an internationalization the other way around. It's not only I bring an American player to Spain, it's not my talent is being exported, I'm then showing the level of Spanish player no matter of the gender.
I mean, to me, it's just been incredible to watch the rocket ship growth of the NWSL. It's staggering, right? And the level of play is really great. So I think, to your point, it just makes a larger pool of people that are interested in soccer that then potentially become interested in Italian soccer or other international leagues.
Very important, women's. 50% of our youth academy players are female, and the quality is actually much better than the boys. And maybe just story, like we only established a women's team, Borussia Dortmund, the first team, a couple of years ago. And when we really wanted to get in, said we have to offer that opportunity for women's. And we had a decision to make. Should we just acquire a team, a local team, and put the BVB logo on and say, now that you're our first team and you play in the second league or first league? But then in talking to our fans and our leadership, we realized that's not the BVB way. We actually built a team from the ground up, starting in league, I think it was league 6 or 7, amateur league, and now we're working our way up. And we are now in the third league, and we're semi-professional, and that's just one way that how we show our commitment to growing the women's sport. And we can learn a lot about women's soccer from the US. I mean, the quality here is so good. That's something that we actually have an eye on to learn from, except, not the other way around.
And we talked about competition with the domestic market. Are you guys all chasing the same eyeballs? How do you view your relationships with each other, given you're in this market? Maybe Nicolás.
I think there's competition, obviously. Like it will be like hypocrisy not to say that, but I think the pie is big enough and the market is big enough, so we can all kind of like find our ways, and it's about like how we go to the market and how we do it. And in the end, what I was saying before, like this is good for soccer. And what matters is that soccer gets as big as it can, and that we are able to build models that are sustainable in the long term. If we are able to do that and we help the sport to grow here, knowing how much competition there is with other sports, we are going to be successful, and we should be proud of the work that we've done.
I mean, Men in Blazers just released, or a few weeks ago, released some research about how promiscuous Americans are with their fandom, especially when it comes to soccer. And so if someone's a Real Madrid fan, it doesn't mean they're not going to also be an Inter Milan fan, or they're not going to be a BVB fan. So there's enough to go around. And again, the more the sport grows, we're all just going to grow with it.
Maybe Adam, last word to you. What will success look like for the leagues, for the teams that are here, established and growing, when we meet maybe in 4 years' time, post a World Cup and Olympics?
Yeah, I think twofold. I think on the personnel player side, I think more and more American players who can make the jump and go and play for some of the biggest teams in the world ultimately shows that the sport is growing and it's doing well here in North America on the playing side. And on the commercialization side, I mean, hopefully that every Italian team has an office here, every Spanish team has an office here, and they're actually building the game and growing it. I think ultimately is a sign that this is working and it's sustainable, which again is ultimately what we all want to try and get to from a football perspective.
Well, I think that's a really positive, healthy note. Thank you all for such amazing insight.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. And we'll be all around to chat afterwards if you'd like, before we move on to the next session. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.